Everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name's Neil Markey, and we're going to do a session today on burnout, which is pretty common these days. And I've got an amazing team here that's going to go through this presentation together and hopefully give you guys some insight on what burnout is and um, how we can build resilience around burnout. Yeah,
Hey
and if you'd
everyone.
like, go ahead and put in the chat where you're dialing in from. And it's always kind of interesting too to just maybe put a word or two in there around why you joined. London, Chicago. It's really fascinating. The programs that we do in the Netherlands now, it's not uncommon for us to have 8 or 10 different countries represented. And it's countries like Pakistan and Saudi Arabia and South Korea. It's really extraordinary. Mexico, New Mexico, United Kingdom, very cool. Ireland, awesome. Thank you all. But we can go to the next slide. So my name's Neil Markey. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Beckley Retreats, and I'm a former Army Ranger captain, McKinsey consultant, and I'm currently at Harvard at the Chan School of Public Health studying the work that we're doing at Beckley Retreats. And so I know burnout personally, and I think over these years I've learned some techniques that I'm excited to share with you all. And I'm really happy to be working with some amazing people, some friends and colleagues, Dr. Aza and Mandy Bent.
Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Aza. I'm an artist and physician scientist, and I'm a psychiatrist who really believes in social dynamics and the ways that music, mindfulness, and psychedelics can change them to, help us to facilitate our healing processes. So I'm really happy to be the head of research at Beckley and share some of the science behind, what we're doing, why it works, and how it can help.
Hi everyone, I'm Mandy Bent and I'm a facilitator with Beckley Retreat and I'm part of the Jamaica team. I also support with integration and I also have a lot of first-hand experience with burnout. So I'm really happy to be here with you today and welcome.
All right, so this is our agenda for today. We're actually going to do a little exercise because we got to practice what we preach. We'll go into burnout. We'll kind of talk about some of the mechanics behind it. We'll talk about integrative health, psychedelics, and the potential for kind of treating burnout, but also avoiding burnout. We'll talk about the Beckley Retreats approach, and then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. And feel free to put questions in the chat as we go. It's actually really appreciated if we start getting some questions in there. All right, and I'll pass it to Mandy to get us started.
So before we move into our content today, we're just going to do a little bit of grounding, small meditation practice. So if you are able to find a comfortable seated position, I invite you to do so. And allow your eyes to close. Simply start taking a couple of deep breaths. And as you inhale, just noticing the body, noticing the movements of the body as you inhale and exhale. And allowing any tension to just drop. If you notice anywhere that you might be holding, allowing that holding to just release. As you breathe, notice if you can allow your breath to get deeper and deeper with each breath. Allowing the body to relax. And then we're going to go into a series of what I like to call airplane stretches. So as you're seated, just doing simple movements, maybe to stretch out the neck, things that you could do in an airplane. Just to wake up the body, you may want to do a spinal twist. And these things you can do also if you're sitting in your office for long hours, bringing the wrists into some circling, one direction, bringing the wrists into circling, another direction, stretching with the arms up, leaning to one side, leaning to the other side. If you can, stretching the legs out in front of you, and at the same time, stretching the arms out in front of you, wiggling the fingers, wiggling the toes, and then giving a little bit of a shake. What we're doing, we're just dropping into the body. Sometimes when we're working a lot or, when we're really busy, we're so much engaged in the mind and we forget that we have a body, this physical body. So just for a few seconds, coming back to stillness with inhales, exhales, and simply noticing. When you feel ready and you can allow your eyes to flutter open, welcome back. Thank you so much for participating. And then coming back to our screen, and yes, we can move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mandy. So what is burnout? Burnout is a state of chronic physical, emotional, mental exhaustion caused by prolonged stress, often work-related, involving depersonalization and reduced performance. One of the most kind of interesting metaphors I've heard for burnout is, if you're in a vehicle, you have the accelerator and the brake, and the accelerator is the sympathetic dominant system, and the brake is the parasympathetic dominant system, and you have them both at the same time. And it's this idea of tired and wired, where you feel like your body's exhausted, but you also can't get deep sleep. It's because you're in this state that is often referred to as burnout. And AZA is going to talk about some of the mechanics of it, but it comes from, overworking yourself to some extent. And then there's a really interesting component of burnout too that I've, personally had myself, but you can also get burnout from being in roles or positions or companies that don't align with your core values. And so we see this actually a lot in medicine, and doctors report very high levels of burnout. It's not because they don't like being doctors, it's because they're very frustrated with the system and they don't feel like they can do what they need to do. So there's these kind of structural things that can create burnout for us. It's like this underlying frustration with the environment that you're in. And then the symptoms can show up in many places. They can show up in the mind, these kind of like anxious thoughts. They can also show up in the body, if you're not resting well, if you're not getting deep sleep, then there's a lot of downstream effects from that. But there are really good techniques, and actually many of them are free, and you can do them on your own. And so there's hope if you're feeling these symptoms, that you can find some relief. And I'll pass it to Dr. AZA to talk a little bit more about the mechanics.
Yeah, and so many people already on the call, have said that they're burnout, so we know what that feels like. But what's happening sort of under the hood, in the brain and in the body, because it really is something that's happening neurobiologically, and there are really changes that we can measure in both the brain and the body and the endocrine function that lets us know that the body mind is not working in the way that it normally does. Two main things we can think about are the HPA axis, and this is people might be really familiar with, but it is a connection between the brain and the rest of the body, particularly the adrenal cortex, which releases cortisol, something people may be very familiar with, but it's one of these molecules in the body that can be very much correlated with stress and has a number of different functions in the brain. And so these coordinate effects, all the negative things that we can see that happens as a result of stress, a lot of it is sometimes mediated by cortisol's actions in different organs. And so you get dysregulation of the HPA axis. And then when we look at the brain, the parts of the brain that are really important for thinking, decision making, focus, like the prefrontal cortex, we can see changes in this part of the brain in people who are under a lot of stress. Another part of the brain that is really popular is the amygdala, which we know to be associated with fear and emotions. This part of the brain can be hyperreactive to stress when someone is burnt out. Another favorite part of the brain is the hippocampus, which is really important for things like memory, both short-term and long-term memory, and this can be affected as well. But I don't think about burnout as something that happens only in individuals. I really think about it as something that's happening at a network level. And it's really something that has to do with how we are situated within our social context and our social environment. And I'll show you why, because many of these same brain circuits that can be affected by burnout are also affected in the ways that we interact socially. And so there's sort of what's emerging as a social neuroscience of burnout. On the right, I have an image where I'm pointing out certain brain regions. The areas in green are known collectively as the default mode network. And this is sort of when you're mind wandering or when you're sort of not really engaged in a particular activity where you can start to get this rumination or self-criticism. This part of the brain can be activated, and we know it's affected by burnout. But importantly, it's also these parts of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the precuneus, and the postcingulate, are also important for social behavior and social cognition. Then there are other parts of the brain, like the amygdala that we talked about being affected by stress, and the anterior cingulate cortex in red. These areas are very important for how we evaluate others in our environment and how we connect to them. And within burnout, these same circuits are being affected. And so when we look at the overlap between the parts of the brain that are important for social connection and social cognition and the parts of the brain that are affected by burnout, we see that there's this overlap. And so burnout can emerge when social synchrony is lost, when we have fragmentation within our meaning-making networks, much of which is dictated and sort of arrived at by our social context. And then lastly, when there's sort of this time collapse, right? Everything feels very urgent and pressured instead of spacious.
I would just ask if anybody can, if that resonates with anybody, go ahead and put in the chat if you've seen burnout show up in your relationships. Thank you, AZ.
Yeah. And I think because we know that there's this overlap in the social areas of the brain and the parts of the brain that are affected by stress, we really think that it's important to target burnout and its prevention by tapping into this idea of social connection and community. And so how does collective regulation work as an antidote? Well, in our evolutionary history, we didn't come about to regulate stress on our own. In fact, we evolved to regulate stress as a group, and we were most safe when we were in a group. And so we actually have nervous systems that want to be co-regulated with others. And we know that group context from some of the work that we've done in our lab can affect things like autonomic tone. These are the parts of the nervous system that affect, your heart rate. How fast or how slow is your heart beating? How fast or slow are you breathing? What is your digestive tract doing? Right? All these automatic functions are controlled by the autonomic nervous system. And when we're really stressed, it goes into hyperdrive, hypersympathetic which is kind of fight or flight. So we're living all of our moments in this hyper aware, hyper vigilant, I would say, not hyper aware, but hyper vigilant, very high stress sympathetic state. And that's part of the reason that we get to burnout. We know that group context actually help to regulate that and decrease that sort of activity. Then oxytocin, which is another really popular hormone signaling that's very important in a number of different parts of our development. So as a baby, when we're first born and we're learning to connect to our mom, oxytocin is an really important part of that process. It's also so important that it is part of what regulates the actual production of milk from the mom to the baby. So this is a hormone that is critically linking our social connection to our actual sustenance. And in relationships, we've now seen that oxytocin can play a very important role in how people feel connected. Even doing activities like sex, oxytocin and dopamine as well are playing a very important role. So we know group context can regulate this sort of signaling. And then lastly, safety. And this idea of safety is going to be so important for you all in thinking about a psychedelic experience, particularly within a group. And one of the things that the group can offer is this idea that, like, I'm not in this alone, right? There's a community that is experiencing this with me. And this really goes very deep into our evolutionary and biological history, in which we were most safe when we were a part of the social group. And so when we think about recovery and prevention, we think that collective regulation, this collective experience and coming together, this ability to have shared meaning and collective embodied reconnection is going to be even more important than just coming up with life hacks or productivity hacks. And so we think that in this integrative context that we're talking about, psychedelics become really important because of a few key mechanisms. And there are a number of them, but I'll just focus on a few for you today. So one of them is serotonin signaling, right? We know that these molecules act on the serotonin 2A receptor, which is a receptor in the brain that can control a lot of different activities, but it's really important for mood and arousal, right? The major treatment for depression and anxiety and even PTSD has been selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. These are molecules that act on the same system, but in a much more long-term, it takes a much longer time to affect activity in the system than psychedelics, which can promote very fast activity within this circuit. You have this change in the way that information flows throughout the brain under psychedelics. This creates opportunity for plasticity and engaging new networks. And when you couple that with a supportive, safe, collective social environment, you're actually able to activate even more networks and different networks than you can, even if you have the psychedelic alone or by yourself. You can have these shifts in your perception of self and your perception of identity, which also can be a part of how one can get out of a burnout scheme or this area in which they're feeling really not able to do it. And so in this retreat context, we're using psychedelics, specifically psilocybin, with a few other components that I'll talk about to create this really marvelous container that doesn't just give you a timeout from stressors, but it actually leverages the group process, and that really facilitates insight, belonging, and this will have a big effect on one's feeling of burnout and even the prevention of burnout. And so our approach is very integrated, and I think there's more than four things, but I think there are four major things I want you to be aware of that's a part of the retreat structure that really help to build this bridge to combating burnout. So live music is a big part of the experience, and we know that this is important neuroscientifically because it entrains neural activity, and we've studied this in our lab. You can get increased interbrain synchrony, and really you're having a collective emotional experience that literally brings the group together at the physiological level. Then we know time and nature can be so important for parasympathetic nervous system activity. Again, when we think about our evolutionary history, we evolved within a natural environment, and having access to trees, water, even natural sounds, we know can decrease activity in regions of the brain like the amygdala, and can really reinforce, even at a greater level, this idea that we are part of a living network. And then there's mindfulness. Very true to form, we started this session with sort of a brief mindfulness activity, but that component is going to be so important for how we navigate, not even navigate all of our experiences, but particularly within the psychedelic context, being able to navigate those experiences. And so we have mindfulness, which again, that default mode network, that same region that I talked about, that's important for social behavior and that can be affected in burnout. You get increased flexibility there with mindfulness. You get increased interoception, being aware of what's happening in your own body. And again, within the group context, it becomes not just about bringing awareness to self, but this idea of shared presence. Now we take all of these components and then we add psilocybin as a great facilitator, mediator to really enhance the impact. And why psilocybin? Well, some of the things I mentioned already, right? It can increase neural flexibility. It reduces activity in parts of the brain that we know are causing cognitive rigidity and negative thought patterns. And again, we know that this idea of safety and trust are prerequisites for having a therapeutic benefit of psilocybin, so we've set that container. And I think one of the key components here is plasticity, right? And so being able to leverage this plasticity within a safe communal context can really help to provide meaning reconstruction, right? How do we create a new sense of meaning, which will be really important for burnout? Identity reorganization. Oftentimes we've become fused with our identity as a certain profession. And so our performance in that profession is also very much linked to our thoughts and feelings about ourself. How can we reorganize one's sense of self and identity? And then relational repair, right? How does this experience with psilocybin within this context allow us to connect to others in a safe way that then allows us to take those skills and take those experiences back into our relationships at home? And so we've been doing some early work to really try to understand this process, the group process within a Beckley retreat, and how it can mediate social connection. And so we've designed some cool tasks like the social perception assessment, which allows us in real time to measure how are people within a group perceiving each other and what kind of impression formation is happening. And we can do that at the retreat. We've actually conducted this pilot, and I'll show you some of the really exciting data from a retreat setting. And so people come in and we take these scores on the social perception assessment. I'm just showing you some of the data here. We ask them questions about familiarity, connection, approachability, right? And these are people who they're not speaking to during the actual interaction. We ask them a number of different questions. And what you can see in gray is pre, so when they first get to the retreat. So they've already been introduced via Zoom and they're there, but they haven't had the first ceremony. And so that's our baseline. And then in blue, the first post, we're measuring after the first ceremony, but before they've done any integration. And then in green, we're measuring again after the second ceremony, but again, before they've done any integration. And what you can see here is really significant enhancements in social perception, really across the board, from that pre-time when they first come together at the retreat to after the second ceremony. We can then break this down to look at sub-networks within the overall group. And in these networks, each of these circles represents a person, and the color of the line represents how connected are they mutually, the average connection between them. And again, you can see from pre-intervention across all three groups to post-intervention too, basically you see there's a lot more red, right? And what that shows us is that there's enhanced connection within these groups, and it is statistically significant. We also took a number of already validated scales. The Watts connectedness scale, we looked at subjective units of distress, nature relatedness, and state anxiety. And again, what we find when we take this already validated connectedness scale, we again see these really great increases in connection over the course of the two ceremonies. When we look at distress, we see that distress acutely decreases over the course of the two ceremonies. And importantly, there's no change in anxiety. And so this tells us that people are actually being they're stable, and they're not having any increased anxiety as a part of having this experience with others. And we didn't have any reportable safety events as a part of this pilot. So lastly, it's interesting. Not only do people feel more connected, but the correlation of how connected they feel to each other actually enhances. So we're really tapping into these dyadic interactions between people and enhancing them within this group psilocybin experience. And you can see the difference between the gray when they first got there to the post period during after the second ceremony. And so this pilot data really shows us that this group experience has a tremendous effect on social connection within a group without having any group level anxiety. And we see these decreases in distress, exactly the types of things that we would see when we're wanting to combat burnout.
Thank you, AZA. Super interesting stuff. I'm so excited about the research that we're doing. And I'll give a bit of an overview of the program that we do at Beckley. Um, we do programs in Jamaica and the Netherlands and have a location that's opening soon in the Middle East, which is pretty exciting. But they're all structured the same. So they have a prepare phase, an immerse phase, which is essentially the retreat, and then an integration phase, and then a grow phase. And in the prepare phase, you're getting access to our catalog of content and our modules, and you're going through a learning journey. It lasts, a few weeks, but it's all self-directed and you can do it from anywhere in the world. But we're teaching the basics. We want to teach meditation, mindful movement, breath work, all things that are free that once you learn them, you can do for the rest of your life, hopefully, and build good habits. We're introducing them early. And then we're also getting the group together digitally through a couple Zoom calls. So you get to meet the other people that are coming down with you. You get to meet the facilitators. We start to build that trust so that once we get to the immersion portion, we can kind of get right to it. And then after the immersion, we do a digital integration that lasts roughly 6 weeks long. Again, don't get scared away by the 6 weeks because you can do it at your own pace from anywhere in the world. But this is where we're really taking advantage of this window of neuroplasticity. So when you have one of these experiences, there's a period of time, few weeks to a few months, where it looks like the body is has a higher potentiality for change, but you got to do the stuff. You have to kind of do the work. But if you consciously, do the practical exercises to put in some new patterns in the way that you think and put in some new habits, it really looks like you can maintain this benefit for a long time. So it's really exciting. You don't necessarily need to keep taking external drugs or other things to make you feel good. You can really just rely on the basics. And then after the formal integration, there's more and more ways that we get our community back together to support each other and do positive things in our lives together. And I'll pass it back to Mandy because she's on the programs and she can give you a little bit more insight to what happens on the day to day. We do 5-night and 4-night programs, but essentially we're doing the same modules in both of those.
Thank you so much, Neil. So, what happens at the actual retreat? Well, first of all, we start off by picking you up at the airport. We have people flying in from all over the world. So, we will transport you to one of our beautiful retreat centers. Right now, we have 2 retreat centers in the Netherlands, and we have we have 2 in Jamaica. We're just starting a brand new 4-day program in Jamaica as well. So, so we have some beautiful venues. And then the program is curated in a way that is going to be super duper supportive for personal growth. So we have not only the ceremony days, we also have integration days. So it's set up where we have one ceremony day, then an integration day, then a ceremony day, then an integration day. And it's basically done this way so that you can rest in between each in between each psilocybin ceremony that you do. So an average day usually starts off with some morning movement. We will have, maybe yoga, tai chi, qigong, something that's really simple and easy. no matter what your level of fitness is or flexibility, we don't do anything hard. We just really want to give you an opportunity to move your body a bit. Especially, I mean, I think, when we're experiencing burnout, that means like a lot of time, sitting, maybe looking at a screen, or maybe just like, even if you're moving around, really just involved in your mind. So we do a lot of activities to kind of help to bring you back into your body. And also, there's nature, if you're in Jamaica, it is, we have beautiful green trees, we have beaches. If you're in the Netherlands, sometimes it's snowing, we have a beautiful sauna that you can use as well, and a lot of things to help you to decompress. So the average day, as I said, is going to start off with some morning movement. We typically offer breathwork sessions, which can be really supportive to our psilocybin ceremonies. And then we have, different talks that happen during the day. You'll have an opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation with a facilitator. So if you're feeling nervous about going into ceremony, you have an opportunity to express that. And so, say maybe talk a bit about the type of support that you think that you may need while in ceremony so that we can be there for you no matter what it is that you're going through. And then we have lovely food. We don't really eat that much on a ceremony day. We like to keep the body a little bit clean. We do have a nice breakfast, and we have a smoothie at lunch. And then our ceremony starts anywhere around 2 or 3 o'clock and can last about 5 hours. And at the end of ceremony, we usually have a very nourishing soup for you and some more good food. And then you'll get a good night rest before we move into integration, which happens the next day. And integration day is basically an opportunity to process what happened for you in ceremony the night before. A lot of you might have really big experiences, really deep experiences. And it's good to be able to kind of sit with those experiences, sit with those experiences and understand, see if you can get some clarity, and also most importantly, to be able to ground yourself before moving into the ceremony again the following day. So we put a lot of emphasis towards rest and recuperation and just helping that energy to settle. Excuse me. And then we also have like a big gap in the day where you can do something like you can have a massage, you can go to the saltwater pool, you can go to the beach, you can go to the sauna, you can stay in your room and journal. A big part of this experience is also being able to rest. A lot of people come to our retreats and, they're really pleased by the experience that they had with the psilocybin, but also they just love the opportunity to disconnect from life and to rest, to be cared for, to have someone feeding them, to not have to cook or clean, and to, be with a group and, chat and get to know people. It's a wonderful opportunity to just like disconnect and breathe for a moment. So, so we have our 2 ceremony days and 2 integration days. And then at the end of the so what we're doing is we're giving you an opportunity to ground before getting back into regular life. So you're going to have 2 ceremonies, and at the last day, you have another opportunity to just kind of like get some clarity, get some grounding, move some energy before it is that you head to the airport and head back to your regular life. And then from there, we're going to have a series of integration calls that will take place over the next 6 weeks. So you're not just left hanging to figure out life on your own. We give you a smooth entry back into your world, and we continue to follow up and check in, and you continue to be part of the group. So it's a really nice schedule that we've created, and we find it to be very supportive to people, just to kind of like work through burnout, work through some of the issues that might be causing burnout, and to rest. And I think I see that we have some questions coming in. So I'm going to pass it over to Neil if you have anything else to say about the retreat experience.
Well, thank you. I was just going to ask or answer this question. It says, what do you mean by ceremony? Is this similar experience like ayahuasca? And I mean, the short answer is yes. We do psilocybin sessions in groups. Oftentimes, some people call them ceremonies. I think you can use whatever language you like, but it's a group session that we actually believe has a lot of positive impact on what people experience. So you can have these experiences one-on-one in a doctor's office, and we're super supportive of that. And frankly, for some people, it's probably more appropriate. But for many, the group experience is very meaningful. And so, we use psilocybin mushrooms, and generally they're much more well tolerated than ayahuasca. So most people, when they have an ayahuasca experience, um, it'll be very tough on the body. They'll feel sick, and some would say that's part of the experience. I think for us, we use psilocybin mushrooms because for most people, it's a more mild experience, but we feel we can get the same level of kind of positive change without all the discomfort. And there's ways that you can prepare the mushrooms that make them much easier on the stomach. And was there any? Okay, that was the two questions. Um, Thank you for those questions. We can keep moving here. And for the Beckley experience, so a couple things that I think we do really well. One, everywhere we operate, it's fully legal. So everything's above board. We're able to get insurance. I would say that we have a very high level of professionalism. Our staff is well trained. We take really good care of them. And you can have, these experiences now in the US, but in a lot of places, it's not technically legal. So do I think the risk is really high? No, but you do need to ask more questions, And so we really like being in places where it's fully legal and we can do everything above board. We take safety very seriously. So we do a very rigorous screening process. We say no to a lot of people because we need to manage the positive group dynamic. We need to make sure that the people are coming down, everybody's kind of on the level playing field. So if someone comes to us and they have very serious kind of indications, we try to get them pointed to places that are more appropriate. Our programs are more for people that are generally well and doing okay, but want to let some stuff go, want to build some new habits, want to feel better, want to be more present with their kids. Our programs are great for that. We have a 1-to-3 facilitator to guest ratio as a minimum. And I would say we have some of the best facilitators in the world, really, because we take really good care of them, and I think a lot of the facilitators really appreciate working with Beckley and continuing Amanda's legacy. So we get to be very selective, and we've got amazing human beings. And yeah, I'm really proud of the program that we have. I think we're getting really, really incredible results. And you can go to the next page.
Neil, there was a question that I saw from the for the panel that maybe I can take.
Yeah, take it.
So yeah, for people who are high performing professionals, what are some common patterns that you see that lead to burnout, and how does the retreat help shift those? And so I think in working with a lot of clients, even outside of Beckley, who are high performing, there are two patterns. There are more, but two that I find very common. One is space time misalignment. So where they spend their time and how they spend their time is not actually aligned with their values, and is not being spent in a way in which they feel like they are growing in a way that's meaningful. And that can take a lot of different shapes, but that's a very common one. The second one is identity fusion, in which they have over time become their job. And so their performance on the job, how people treat them on the job, everything about the job becomes who they are. So even when they're not at the job, they are still identified with that job, and that creates a lot of tension. And at the retreat, not just the group psilocybin experience itself, but all the other components in preparation, the mindfulness activities, the yoga, all these things, one, provide both space and time to reevaluate. Oftentimes they haven't picked their head up to actually see where they are and reevaluate. And so it gives you time to do that. And then, through their intentions, there are certain experiences they might have during psilocybin that can help to show them the direction that they want to go in terms of how they want to grow and how they want to take that time. And then with identity fusion, this sense of self and self-awareness can be fundamentally, changed with a group psilocybin experience. And that can kind of reshift how they think about their identity and recreate that separation between who they are, what they are, and their profession or the thing that they do or how they want to have impact, in the world.
Thank you, AZA. And I think this is one of our stats that we're the most proud of. 88% of our guests say their experience was with us was one of the most meaningful experiences of their lives. And I think most of our guests go on to live much more positive lives, relationships improve, they feel more present. Now you got to keep doing the work, but these types of programs do really offer an opportunity to make pretty significant positive change. And so I think we're at Q&A time. We only have a few minutes left. In your research, how long do the benefits on burnout and social connection typically last after the retreat, and what seems to help people maintain the changes? You want to take that, AZA, or
Yeah, that's
Mandy?
a great
Yep.
question. So we're in the process now of doing these longer term follow ups. One of the things that we do is create these group, messaging structures, and up to years after people's initial retreat, those groups are often still very much in communication with each other and supporting each other through various channels. So I think there's definitely a signal there, but to kind of really rigorously answer that question, we're still in the process of getting like 6 month follow up, a year long follow up.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it depends. Like we don't have the data yet, but anecdotally, we do stay in touch with our guests, and I would say the level of kind of benefit is strongly correlated to the amount of effort that someone puts into it. So if they really commit to trying to build new habits and you're daily doing the meditations and you're thinking more about healthy diet and you're getting in nature and you're concentrating on having really good positive relationships in your life, you're going to feel good, but the thing is that life happens and we fall off our habits, and you're always in this kind of trying to get back on the wagon, and that's just being human. So it just depends. It depends. Any other questions? Or we'll follow up if you joined, we'll have your email, so we'll send some more information. And we'd love your feedback on this presentation, if it was helpful, or if there was parts where we should have explained more. And yeah, we're here. We're easy to get a hold of. You can reach out through email. You can book a call on our site. You can always get to a human. I promise you that. And yeah, thank you so much for taking some time to join us. All right. Well, have a great rest of your day. Hope to see some of you soon. Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks, AZA and Mandy. Appreciate you guys.